Hey y'all, I'm Chase Clemens, and this is the Support Ops Hangout. This is the show that helps you deliver a better support experience to your customers. We've got some of the best support pros in the business on our crew, so before we dive into this week's topic, let's go ahead and make sure you know everybody now. Carolyn is, last we heard, trapped in an Apple store, so we hope to hear from her soon, sometime, maybe, possibly, if she can escape from there. Jeff will be up in just a second, but first up, Chase Livingston, getting to go first again this week. Big week.
It's pretty awesome. Glad to be here.
Oh, yeah. And then for viewers of the video, you can see, like with mine, there's this big blank wall behind me, which is really exciting. So we're down in Auburn this week, and this is my little nook. It's nice. Like I mentioned, Jeff's going to be on in a second, so we'll go ahead and introduce him when he gets there. But we want to get you kind of in the topic. So for this week, we're talking about really one of the most important boundaries that you can set. This is kind of when I was first thinking about this particular theme for this series, it was kind of the one that naturally popped in my head, and it was your time. You only get so much of it, so every little bit that you get counts. My boss, Jason Fried, had this article he wrote a couple of weeks ago, and I just kind of love this quote, so I wanted to throw it in here. He wrote, "Imagine if anyone could just take some money out of your bank account when they needed it. Time's more valuable than money, yet that's exactly what people are doing with other people's time." So we want to talk about time this week, just kind of how you structure the time that you have, when you say yes to stuff, when you say no to stuff, what boundaries do you have? Some people do no email Mondays, or no meeting Fridays, or I guess that would really be no meeting Mondays. It has a better alliteration to it, kind of like Taco Tuesdays always has to happen on Tuesdays and Stir Friday. So yeah, Chase, let's kind of start with you, because we do have it's such a bigger company when we talk about Automatic. So if somebody needs to sit down with you for, I don't know, a chat or one-on-one or whatever, right? How does that kind of play into your schedule? How does somebody figure out a good time to meet and talk about things?
Yeah, so I try to schedule those on days that I already have other meetings, maybe. So if I'm going to be in, then I might as well do another one if I have the time or whatever. And so one of the things we do on our teams is we call them Ticket Smashing Mondays or whatever you may call it. So we try not to have meetings and any one-on-ones or team meetings or anything like that on Mondays, just so we can really focus on our tickets that have come in over the weekend. We're really fully staffed every weekend, and so it's just something we've just started doing every Monday, regardless of whether we have everybody online on the weekend or not. And just try to go into the week strong, get things under control, and sort of set the tone for the rest of the week. And so yeah, normally we just at least, and me personally too, try to schedule meetings for later in the week and avoid that Monday, because sometimes coming in off the weekend can be a little rough, and just catching up on things that have happened. So that's one of the big things that I do as far as scheduling things around other meetings and that kind of thing. Just sort of fit it in where it will fit.
So you've got the emails going on. You've got people trying to set meetings and things with you throughout the week. How much time are you setting aside for your stuff, projects you might be working on, or hell, even just time to think about whatever new projects you might want to pick up?
Yeah, that's honestly something that I should probably be better at. I have tried in the past. I guess you would call blocks of time or whatever for certain things. And so actually scheduling out time in your calendar to sort of train your brain and really just get you in a mindset of, okay, this is writing time, and then, for an hour, and then this next hour is planning time for whatever project I might be working on. I've tried that in the past, and it hasn't always stuck, but it's probably something I might should try again, just because of how many things are going on and how many, plates are in the air, if you will, right now. And it's honestly probably something that I could learn from some other folks on how to make sure that time is there when it's needed, and I don't overcommit myself as far as scheduling meetings and my calendar goes.
Yeah, I'm the same way. That idea of blocking out, I'm going to work on this for an hour, then I'm going to work on this for 2 hours, I'm going to work on this for 30 minutes. That never has worked at all. I guess it works for some people. For me, it's always So if you say you're going to sit down and work on some idea that you have, right? So maybe it's the beginning stages of an idea that you want to just take some time to think through and kind of jot down some stuff and kind of get the ball rolling. Trying to bucket that in like an hour is just so hard. Maybe it's just me, I don't know, but I get in that hour and then I'm like once you finally do kind of get going, then you're like 15, 20 minutes into the block. And now you're like, well, crap, I've got like 40 minutes left.
Yeah, my brain doesn't always understand that that's the time to think about and come up with those ideas. So it does, take a little while to get going, and then you may hit a block and, end up going on to other things. But then you may find later on in the day that you actually do have an idea and need the time to sit down and really think it out. But, if you've scheduled yourself pretty tight for the rest of that time, then it makes it tough.
Yeah. So what do you do in those situations? Like even like now, what do you do when you sit down to work on something, it's not flowing for whatever reason, so you kind of just put it off and come back to it later. How do you make sure that you get back to it?
I try to, I try to be pretty good about like either setting reminders or just keeping like a note open and Apple Notes or something like that. Just something to, I guess, keep track so I don't like lose the thought or lose the thing that came to mind, even if I don't have time to, take action on it. I use, Todoist for like task management and stuff. So it's just, if it's just something that, a box I need to check later for a certain task, I'll, quickly, add it in there and then come back to it later. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, everybody has, their own ways that work for them. For me, I try to, you can jot it down somewhere, make a note of it, and then come back to it when I do have the time, if it's just not working out for me right then.
Yeah. Now I know one of the kind of the big fads lately is using different apps and things to keep track of. I've spent 2 hours on, I don't know, social media, 2 hours on cases, 2 hours on email, an hour on this, an hour on that. Have you found any utility for something like that? I mean, in my head, it's one of those where it might help to, especially somebody that's new to kind of setting boundaries here. A time, it's not really like a time tracking. You would think of like a client time tracking app, but an app like that kind of shows you where you're spending your time or what websites you're visiting, things like that. Like it might help somebody new to kind of setting boundaries to set those. But I don't know, like, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I've used in the past, I think it's called like Rescue Time or something like that. And that really just shows you what you're spending your time on your computer, as far as, I had Slack open for, day, and then I had Chrome open for whatever, but it really just, I think, focuses on the foremost app. So, I might be looking at Chrome and it might be the active app, but I can still be, scanning Slack over on the left, even if it's, or wherever on the screen, even though it's not actually the active app, I might still be spending time reading through it. And then there's another app I've heard, but I haven't tried. I think it's called Toggle, Toggl or something like that. That is, I think, geared towards time tracking and maybe even lets you do some more, I guess, manual tracking of time, as far as, okay, well, I'm going to sit down and, work on tickets now. And so you start a timer or something like that, and it tracks how long that timer goes for, obviously, and then you just stop it when you're done. And I think that can help you organize and find out, where you're spending your time as well. So I do agree, for somebody, especially just starting out in a new position, that's probably pretty helpful if it's, different, and the responsibilities and things you have to keep up with are different than what you've done in the past. It is helpful to know how much time you're actually spending. You may think you're spending 30 minutes, but it could be 2 hours and you just didn't realize it, if you really get in the zone and start working on something. So it is helpful to at least have an idea, even if it's just a rough idea of what time you're spending on certain things.
Yeah, so you brought up something there that I kind of want to touch on, because it's something that I've found myself doing a lot, not necessarily in the last couple of months, because I realized it one day, and then I kind of have been working on not doing it as much. But when we talk about time and your calendar and things like that, we naturally tend to think of like somebody trying to get some of that time, or somebody trying to meet with us in some way, shape, or form, or call or whatever, right? But apps do the same thing. Like you were just talking about how many times you look over and look at Slack and try to catch up on stuff. And like that breaks for me anyways, it breaks the content. It's context switching, right? And the more of that you do, the more time you lose naturally, because it's all right. Now I'm moving to Slack. I'm reading through a conversation. My brain has to shift into like the context of that specific conversation, how it relates to what's being said right now, and then you have to switch back to whatever else you were working on before. So how do you manage all that? Is it, you mentioned just kind of having it up over on the side, like how, any tips, tricks or whatever for not letting it kind of like suck away your time just like a person would?
I definitely could be better about that for sure. So, I think that's honestly Slack and things like that sometimes can be
anything
some of the most,
with a badge.
yeah,
Anything
it can
with a
be
notification,
some of the
anything with a
most,
thing.
some of the most distracting and, time sinks as far as, work days go. A lot of times I'll find myself, I'll do 5 or 10 tickets and then, pop back over to Slack and catch up on all the channels and stuff that have unread messages. And so that, wastes 10 or 15 minutes that I could have, just been doing some more tickets, but I feel like I need to catch up there, and then I'll go back and do 3 tickets and come back. And so it is, a major burden as far as context switching and stuff. So I think one of the things I should probably do is just be more about either hiding the time and actually just focusing on either doing tickets or whatever I need to be doing at the moment, and then maybe switch back to open Slack back up after that and check on what's happened if there's anything important, and then do the same thing again. A lot of people use I think the Pomodoro technique, where you're working for focused on one task for 20 minutes, I think is the official time, but you can really do whatever you want. Just focus on it for 20 minutes and then take a 5 or 10 minute break to check Slack or check Twitter or whatever you need to do to sort of take a break, and then you jump back in and focus for another 20, and you just repeat that all day. And I think that can be helpful too. I guess I don't exactly feel like I work that way, but maybe if I were more intentional about it, I might find that something like that might work. I think for each person is different as far as your attention span and how long you can focus on that one particular task before you need to sort of switch and do something else. So,
yeah, definitely. That's one of the things. So typically through my day, it's almost like a natural 20-minute chunk. Like I don't have like a Pomodoro app or anything up in the corner or like a timer or anything like that. But it feels like for me, I'll work for about 20 minutes on customer interactions and chats and emails and things like that. And then I'll move into switch over with kind of catching up. What's been said in the chat room recently? Are there any new messages or things that I should look at? And even that might be too much. I mean, it's really saying something if you can't go an hour without Slack, right? Now I'm not talking like if an app, like if your product goes down and you kind of, then, everyone gets a notification and you can kind of pull back in at that point. But like your regular run-of-the-mill workday, right? You probably don't need to live in Slack, for 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 minutes, in a chunk like that. I think that one of the biggest things for me has been the disabling as much of those pop-up badges and notifications and all that as I can. Like even to the point where it took me a while to get used to, but like hiding the menu dock. I have a Mac, and so you can hide the menu dock. I guess you can on Windows. I don't really know. But when you do that, it lets you focus on that one thing that's in front of you. And it just really has kind of helped me. It's not really a fight or a battle, but it's definitely one of those, like it has helped me get better about focusing on whatever is right in front of me rather than kind of splitting things off.
Yeah, and I guess the Macs have, the do not disturb mode you could turn on too. I've done that. And sometimes, a lot of times I'll even do that, like while we're doing the podcast or whatever, just turn on do not disturb so I don't have things, distracting me, obviously, while I'm trying to focus on either a call I'm on or especially the podcast here. And I haven't tried it a whole lot, but I think that could be useful as well, during your workday. If you're, want to really focus in on something and not be interrupted by anything, just turn on do not disturb. And that way it'll silence all your notifications, and then you can turn it off and see if there's anything important you missed. And I think a lot of people might find that there probably isn't as much as you think you're going to miss for, an hour. You might feel like you're completely disconnected and are going to miss all that conversation and, important information that's come via email or Slack or whatever. But I think you might be surprised how little important stuff actually happens, in any given hour that you can't just catch up on an hour later. It's not, life or death in most cases.
Yeah, it's definitely, well, we used to have the saying at the deli, like, it's just sandwiches, just making sandwiches. It's not that big a deal. And for me, it always helps to like put myself in a situation of, all of our interactions with customers are online. Whether it's email, chat, or whatnot. Like, what if that customer was standing right in front of you and you were like trying to figure out what was going on with them, trying to watch like this conversation that was happening with your coworkers over here and keeping up with this timer over here that just keeps going ding, 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 ding. Like, you wouldn't do that to a customer, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. That's a funny way to think about it, but yeah, there's no way that we would do that if we were, an Apple genius at the Genius Bar, for example. Yeah. They're not constantly doing, 5 different things, checking their phone and checking some other computer. They're focused in on, the person that they're working with and trying to resolve their problem. So I think it's helpful to keep that in mind for sure. I mean, there's always exceptions and things that we do are a little bit different, but in general, I think that's a good rule and a good thing to think about.
And here's the man of the hour. Speak of him, Jeff from Wistia. Sorry, he's having to come in on the tail end of this, but yeah, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. Thanks for bringing me in.
Yeah, no worries. So the conversation at this point has just kind of quick recap, and one of the things that you can kind of jump in with here, we've been talking about how people. So if your time is like a bank account, people are very eager, might not be the right word, but they are quick to jump in and take it when they need it, right? So we've been talking about ways that you can kind of set up boundaries around your time and protect it as much as you can. And one of the kind of interesting things that Chase Livingston brought up was that, this happens with people, but it also happens with apps. Right? Like, think about how many times Slack is over in the corner going bing, 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 like trying to get your attention about something. Or, maybe your work email is doing the same thing and blowing up. And it kind of, there's so much context switching that happens at that point. Like, you want to sit down, you want to work on this thing, but then all of a sudden all this other stuff is going on, vying for your attention too, and draining away all that time that you've got in your bank account. So how do you deal with that? Like, how do you focus on the one thing and kind of not ignore, but like push out all of those other people and apps that are vying for your attention?
I don't. All right.
You just let it come, like watch it.
But I think it's really important to know your most important thing is, your one thing is. That's something that mentor, manager, whoever is helping you work on the work, should be able to give. That's something you should be able to work with them. I think that's really important. Otherwise, you Forrest Gumping yourself, right? Turn back, you could end up yourself. You think is your one thing, else thinks is important. And I also think a lot of things that people things are not. A lot of things that people think require time to sit down and talk about, you really fit nonsense chit chat, and then you end up without your action items because no one's exactly clear on what they need. You're really, really clear on why are we meeting. A lot of times you're like, wait a minute, we don't need a meeting. We could just write all this out and then come back to it. I have a lot of experience pushing back on meetings, and then we just never talk about it. So clearly whatever that thing was, it was not that important. I don't recommend other people do that, but it's certainly helpful to think of when you're setting up a meeting, like, do I really need this info, or is this kind of like, it'd be nice to have? Yeah, there's a lot of interplay between how the organization sets up what's important and how teammates figure out which of these meetings should I either set up or attend or spend my time thinking about.
Yeah, so I like the trick there as far as like pushing back a little bit and seeing if they can answer that kind of question. So if I mean, you can kind of do that because you've been at Wistia for a while. Like, what happens if you're a new manager, a new team member, and, you're working on something and somebody wants some of your time? Like, how do you say no?
It's extremely hard, especially in an in-person culture, co-located culture like ours, because you're like saying no, and the person's like right next to you.
They're just like, hey, did you see that over there? And then just run the other way.
And everyone's sense of what busy means looks like something out of more of like the industrial or like the doing it world, where, yeah, I'm busy. You'd expect to look over and that person is like literally typing, or they're writing something or drawing, or they're in another meeting or whatever, and historically it would have been like, I'm busy because I'm either gone or I'm like working on another widget thing. Now you actually are busy if you're just thinking about what you need to do, if you're just sorting out what's the most important thing for you to work on, but it doesn't look like busy. And that can create a lot of like guilt and feelings if you're being asked to do stuff and you're like, well, I'm not technically busy, but man, I really need that time. And we end up doing that time like in the shower or when we're with our friends or our partners. We're actually spending time thinking about that project that we're supposed to be thinking about. And I think that's not sustainable. And it certainly doesn't get you the best work. So again, it's like there's interplay between what the organization needs to do to set people up for success, right? You have to set rules. I think Basecamp is a leader on this, that the organization says, hey, we want to grow and we want to do this and this better, but we're not doing it at the expense of all of our people running around crazy. We're not doing it at the expense of having to hire 20 new people. We're going to do what we're going to do, and we're going to add, 5 people to our headcount in order to do it. So now with that set as the baseline, let's start talking about what we can accomplish. And I think that's a really smart way to go about it.
Yeah, I know with our support team, you've got a whole day for it. We call it Research and Innovation Days, R&I Days. Everybody's got one a week, and you control that day. If it's literally just, catching up on a book that you think will help the rest of the team, do it, and then share whatever you learned. Or if the thinking part can always be so tough, because like, you're right, we need time to have that, Cal, what's his name, calls deep thinking. Yeah, I still need to read that book. It's on my list to order. But that deep thinking, which you might come up with something at the end of it, or it might literally be like the pieces are all still rumbling around, but at least they're like closer to fitting, right? It's kind of like you've gone from just throwing all the puzzle pieces on the table to like, oh, well, like here's all the edge pieces over here. Like I know where those are now. And here's all the like center pieces. I know where those are now. It's not really something that, especially if you're remote and you're kind of like, trying to tell others what you did that day. Well, I separated into edge and non-edge pieces, but it took 6 hours. Like that's fine. It feels weird to say that, but it's fine. Like that work is needed, because that's when you'll start putting things together and start making the puzzle. Livingston, at Automatic, we were talking about, you've got the I forget what term you used for the Mondays, but the nothing but email.
Ticket smashing Mondays is
Ticket smashing Mondays.
The colloquial term.
I was like, Manic Monday. No, that's not the word he used.
Not quite, but close.
So you've kind of got that in play. What are there any other kind of like policies like Jeff was talking about that Automatic is set up to make sure like you can kind of protect your time without being the bad guy or whatever for saying no?
Yeah, I mean, I think Automatic sort of recognizes the 80-20 time kind of thing that a lot of folks do. I don't know if it's necessarily a hard and fast thing. Like we don't all have the same day, obviously, that we're working on our, 20% projects or whatever, but it's definitely something that's encouraged. And I think if we all took the same day, then obviously no users would get answers that day, which would be bad as well. So that's sort of just, up to each person individually when they want to take the time to do that. So I think that's another, an easy sort of a common thing that we do. As far as anything else, I mean, we definitely, set our own schedules pretty much. And there's just, maybe 1 or 2 meetings a week that are sort of mandatory as far as like a team meeting, and then potentially a one-on-one either every week or every other week. But other than that, we're pretty free to set our own schedules and sort of work around everything else for whatever we need to do. It's not something where somebody's just, peering over my shoulder or, watching my screen to see what I'm doing. So there's definitely the freedom there to do what we need to do, essentially.
Jeff, we were talking with Livingston earlier about kind of those, ticket smashing Mondays and things like that. A lot of times folks will have kind of those policies in place, right? Or guidelines, whatever you want to call them, the no meeting Mondays, the free time Friday. I don't know. I'm running out of alliteration. The other ones the only other ones I have are food related, like Taco Tuesday and Stir Friday.
Love that.
So yeah, like when it comes to your time, are there any informal, like, you reserve Friday just for, thinking through things? Is it you try to put like all your one-on-ones on like Tuesdays, anything like that?
I have, the only thing that going into the week I have protected is I have 2 hours on Wednesdays for processing time. Mm-hmm. And it makes sure that those links that I'm like, man, this article sounds like it's just talking about a problem that I'm having right now. Or I had somebody, I'm emailing people all the time saying, how do you do this? Or how can I improve at that? And they'll get back to me and say, suggest a time that might work. I try to protect that Wednesday time. It's not no meeting time. It's almost like professional development time. Yeah. I want to get better at my job, and I want to protect time without being too prescriptive with myself, I guess, about like, this is the time to get better at it. So if my manager, if my leader Brendan says, hey, here's like a piece of what you're doing that I think really we need to improve upon, I'll make sure to schedule for a few weeks in a row time during that Wednesday slot to look into that, to make sure that I'm doing it, setting up the habit. And then informally or like more flexibly, I try to plan my days out as much as possible. By the middle of the morning, I like to have my whole calendar full of either somebody has asked for a meeting and I agree that we should have the meeting, or I block the time for myself to say, wow, today I really need to answer that Chase Clemens email that I never answer. And I'll put
it's still sitting there.
I know. Yeah. Well, that's the second part of it, is I put 15 minutes on the calendar, and then at least I can review at the end of the day and say, did I do that? And there's lots of times I say, nope, I blew right through that time because something else was more important. But at least I give myself that time to say, in the service of, what's that book that we read? Essentialism. Essentialism? Yeah, Essentialism. Was it actually important, or did I just think it was important and it was really just urgent? At least I can review that for myself. So that's what I try to do.
Yeah. So Livingston and I were having an interesting conversation earlier. Both of us are very much like, here's like 3 things that we want to get done today. There's no set time when that's going to happen. It's just, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, like, it rolls to the next day, and you kind of, catch up on it then. From what you're describing, it's like you kind of lay out like hour by hour, chunk by chunk, like I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Like, how does that work? How well does that work? Do you find yourself blowing through stuff frequently, or is it, like you mentioned, okay to do that? It's just, it turns out that wasn't important.
Well, I do find myself blowing through stuff because someone will say, hey, we really need to figure this out. Can we meet in the next hour? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I'll just move this stuff to tomorrow. And then occasionally at the end of the week, I'm like, why is my Friday so full of time before I even started the day? Oh, I scheduled all these meetings with myself because I pushed them from day to day. Something's wrong, right? And for some people, I think they'd look at their Friday schedule and say, oh, that's a role. Actually, that's a role that the organization needs, is I have these 4 or 5 hours that are blocked that actually could be 20 to 30 hours if somebody really was doing a great job of it, rather than me just slowly punting it from day to day. Other times I'm like, yeah, you know what? I got caught up in something, in a project that I shouldn't have. And I think that happens to everybody too. They sign up for something that they had no business signing up for. And rather than pushing somebody else to do it, they just said they would do it. I think it's a lot harder in the customer-facing roles, where your business as usual is like 80+% of your everyday job is like already planned before you even come in. So you're talking about a half an hour that you have to play with each day, as opposed to, for the most part, I have a few hours each day that are not already scheduled with meetings. So I have a little bit more time to play with. Yeah, a lot of stuff slips. You got to be honest with yourself. Try to review at the end of the week how you did and try to get better. And I think sharing that with your manager is a great way to figure out, is that a role kind of in hiding? Me not doing a good enough job of pushing stuff to other people, delegating and that kind of thing? Or am I just not doing the most important work?
All right, so Chase Livingston, you get the final say. Anything else you want to throw in?
No, I think that's great. Definitely agree with everything Jeff said as well. So hopefully that's helpful to the listeners for the and too, knowing that we're not as great at the time management aspect of our job. I think that's something that everybody can work to improve on.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. It's work just like anything else. It's whether it's you block out each day or whether it's you kind of take more of a free-willing whatever. I remember reading an article about Warren Buffett. So you would think that Warren Buffett has this like crazy packed out schedule, like, for the next couple of months or whatnot. He doesn't. It's basically 24 hours. So say you want to have a meeting with Warren Buffett on Friday, you call Thursday and see if he has time for you on Friday. And that's as far out as they'll schedule, like 24 hours from that day, which I thought was really cool. And yeah, I mean, you got to work at it. You got to make your space, but you also you get to decide. You get to decide who gets your time. It might be some constraints in there as far as customer work, as far as cases and live chat and things like that. But even that, you and your team get to sit down and decide is it okay if a customer waits an hour for a reply so I can do this deep thinking work over here? Is it okay if we have a 4-hour reply if I can make sure that this other person gets to do, work on this other project that's going to work out for customers in the long run? You get to decide that. That's the big thing. And that's the thing I think we want our listeners to take away from all of this. So
100%. Being more intentional about your time will have immediate and dramatic impacts on your impact. And it's amazing how often we assume getting back to this customer is the most important thing. And actually you talk to your leader, your team lead, or even all the way up to the CEO, and they're like, you know what, we actually need you all to grow and improve as a team. And so if we can't build that, it's okay for that customer to wait. Maybe we need to set up priority, non-priority inboxes or whatever. There's all kinds of ways around it. But if you don't raise it and you're not aware of it, and you run the risk of just sliding in, day to day. So good.
All right. So that's our take on this one. Let us know what you think. It's hello@supportops.co, or you can hit us up on Twitter. We're @supportops there. Yeah. So thanks again for joining us. And until we see you again next time, have an awesome week.